It's a lovely Tuesday morning. Hello to you, Kalila.
How are you doing, Amka?
I'm well. It's a morning where the top trends on social media are Jamaica, Port Royal Cruise, Trinidad, CARICOM, and Holness for a number of reasons.
Interesting.
Kalila, what's on your mind?
Well, two of those four things that you mentioned are on my mind. Actually, three of them. One of them I had intended to talk about extensively today for the majority of the segment, and that's Port Royal. So last week, I went through all the trouble of getting myself accredited for the event, and, I really wanted to attend the historic docking because it's a big deal. And it will mean so much for the people of not only Port Royal, but for tourism in Kingston. And then at the last minute, I said, Kalila, sit down with your big belly and stay home. Rest yourself, relax, all right? But I still do intend to talk about it more extensively, perhaps on another morning. This morning, what caught my attention was the latest nationwide Blue Dot poll, which have to do with the administration deserving a second term. 61% of Jamaicans believe that the Andrew Holness administration deserves a second term in office, and that's the finding of the latest nationwide Blue Dot poll that was in our 6 o'clock news. And the story that we carried mentioned that the last time an incumbent JLP administration won a contested general election to win a second consecutive term in office was more than 50 years ago, all the way back in 1967, when Donald Sangster led the JLP to victory. Now, it did note that Siaga got a second term in 1983, but then that's the election, as you know, that the PNP had boycotted in December of that year. So we can't really count that one as winning a second term per se. So this indication now that a majority of Jamaicans, a fairly strong majority, 61%, believe the Andrew Holness administration deserves a second term in office is definitely something worth noting. It's certainly great news for Andrew Holness and his team, for the administration. Confirmation that they are riding a strong wave of support. And we heard the Prime Minister hint at elections after the budget. So this is what he said to party supporters.
You will know when we are approaching the time when I change my shoes. Right? You will know when I put on the track shoes. You will know even better when I put on the spikes. Because then you will know if it is a long distance race or a sprint. Because I hear a whole heap of people talking about election as if it's them going to call the date. I say, man, already gone to the starting line, ready to take off. I mean, yes, ready to take off. But let me assure Jamaicans that this government is not going to put politics over the national interest. At this present point in time, it is in the nation's interest to maintain the stability that exists. It is in the nation's interest to have the economic programs continued and anchored in a budget. We don't want to disturb those things. We work too hard to get here. So a lot of people saying, call it no man, call it no man. Remember now, we still have the duty of the national interest and a lot of work still to be done.
That's Prime Minister Andrew Holness speaking. Well, he was addressing party supporters at an Area Council 3 meeting in Palmer's Cross, Clarendon over the weekend. So a lot of people taking some hints and some clues from that.
Is that the Prime Minister saying that it will be likely called after the budget, or he won't call it this year? I don't think you can deduce either from it.
You don't think so? Well, the one thing we can deduce is that it's not going to come before the budget.
Well, I think yes. I think that was common knowledge. However, the fact that
because he was
we
addressing some people saying, "Oh, you should call it no." So he's saying, "Okay, it's not going to happen before the budget." So,
but he says there's a lot to do.
After the budget could be any time.
He says there's a
but
lot
talking
to do.
about, he showed his desert Clarks that he was wearing, kind of made it seem like, he's preparing, because the last time he wore it was during campaign time.
He says the track shoes are not yet on, and there's a lot to do. One and two, there's need for stability. So who knows? I can't deduce based on what he said that it may be after the budget. So I have my suspicions, but just based on those comments, it appears to me that I don't think you can deduce that it's either after the budget or next year. Or I think it has to be either, next year or before. But I just can't deduce from those comments whether he's saying after budget or look, I'm going to wait until next year.
After the budget could be next year. Who knows?
Well, immediately after the budget.
I think perhaps people like me are looking for any sign that they can get as to when the election would be called. I do think it's going to be after the budget. Certainly it wouldn't be before the budget. So those who are saying call it now and it could be any day now, I definitely don't think that's going to happen. You call an election before a tough budget because you need a mandate from the people. For example, the last election that Andrew Holness called, in which he said that there would need to be bitter medicine administered. He needed that mandate from the people to go forward with the budget that he knew would have had to be presented. Now he's in an entirely different position. He's in a position to offer goodies in the budget and then call the elections. And so what will they come with? Which is why I think that it's going to be called not too long after the budget, within perhaps a couple of months of the budget, at least time for the measures that they pass in the budget to be put into effect and for people to start seeing and feeling and benefiting from whatever it is that they offer in the budget. So will it be better than last year's Santa Clark $14 billion in tax give-backs, where they abolished the minimum business tax? They did some things with the asset tax. They raised the amount you can borrow under NHT. They did quite a bit in last year's budget. We're expecting them to do more in this coming budget and then ride that wave to election. The one thing that can hurt them, though, is the stink of corruption. And this CMU issue couldn't have come maybe it could have come at a worse time. It could have come a few months from now, right when they're getting ready to call the election or after they had called the election. And then again, another NNN Blue Dot poll indicates that that's not such a big deal to voters, because 64% have indicated in the poll that they believe the Andrew Holness administration is corrupt. 30% of those gave the administration a 5 out of 5 for corruption. But then the same sample of people said that corruption won't influence their likelihood to vote for the current administration. And the same sample of people gave the edge to Andrew Holness over Peter Phillips for handling corruption. And now the same sample of people in the poll results released this morning say that the Andrew Holness administration deserves a second term. So still, the Prime Minister has acknowledged this issue of corruption. Let me play the clip. This is what he said at the same JLP event over the weekend.
Corruption is not a JLP problem, though the opposition will try to turn it into a political issue to cast it one way. But, the Jamaican people, by virtue of what you're seeing being reported, are not fooled by their statement. And a better approach would be to look at the issue of corruption as a social problem and how we can get our Jamaican people to appreciate and understand it from that perspective, rather than looking at it merely as a political problem or a partisan problem.
So the thing is, the poll results, and from all indications, are that the next election is the JLP's to lose. Corruption is an issue, yes, but I think, Abka, that they have to be careful that they don't get too arrogant. I think in the eyes of voters, arrogance is even worse than corruption.
Yeah, but I think the Prime Minister may well be onto something when he speaks about corruption as a national problem, and the same for crime. I think the electorate, a significant portion, may well contemplate corruption and crime as a national problem. And I'll give you an example why I say so. The PNP won 18 consecutive years in office during a time when murders moved from just over 400 to 1,674 in 2005. Yeah, and there were multiple scandals. There was a time when Audley Shaw was basically outing a scandal per week or so. And they won 4 terms. So is it that the electorate look on crime or corruption as a political problem or a problem specific to a political party and they vote accordingly? I don't think so.
Yeah, that's a good point. But what I was trying to get at is that I think arrogance by politicians is what can and will lead to their eventual downfall, a feeling by voters that they're being taken for granted, even more so than the big issues of the corruption and the crime. Yeah, you can be corrupt, but you must work and you must take care of me. Yeah? And you mustn't come with an attitude that you're better than me, because then that's when I'm going to vote you out of office.
Well, I can agree with that. For example, before the last general election, the PNP decided they won't debate. And even their own polls,
good example,
looking at the reasons for the defeat, indicated that a perception of arrogance betrayed in that posture. We won't debate. We don't feel that we should, put our plans against that which the opposition then was proposing before a national forum. It was a sign of that, so I can take that point.
Good example. Excellent example, actually. So the message here, at least from me, is even though these poll results are good for the administration, they must not take it as don't let it get to your head. Continue putting in the work, and we'll see what happens come the next election. That's what's on my mind.